I thought I was infertile, so I agreed to adopt a child, never imagining that the child was actually my husband's with his mistress. I once believed Marcus was the best thing that ever happened to me. He wasn't just handsome and successful. He knew how to make me feel loved and cherished. We held hands through my parents' funeral, stood before their portraits, and promised to preserve what they left behind. The estate, the company, and that old villa in the suburbs, where I once imagined children's laughter echoing through every morning. But 6 years passed and the house stayed silent. No cries of babies. No cradle, no lullabies. Only infertility tests, reassurances from a doctor Marcus recommended, and the cold conclusion that I couldn't bear children. He held me close and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. We can adopt. We can still be a family." I believed him. Believed him enough to sign papers I didn't read carefully. Believed him enough to take the pills he said were just for wellness. Believed him enough to love the child he brought home, as if it were a gift from fate itself. Only, fate didn't write that script. My name is Nolan. I'm 38 now. I met Marcus when I was 30. Back then, I was still recovering from the shock of losing both my parents in a car accident in Colorado. They were on their way to an investor conference when the SUV hit a divider. The driver had fallen asleep at the wheel. I was their only child. No siblings. No close relatives. All I had left was their legacy. An industrial equipment distribution company, a few properties in Texas, and over $6 million in a trust fund. And then Marcus entered my life, as if every empty space in my world had been carved just for him. He showed up at an old friend's reunion, calm, sophisticated, thoughtful. Marcus used to be a financial advisor for a corporation in Chicago. We talked about business, stock markets, and then slowly about loss and unfinished dreams. He listened with warm eyes, sometimes pausing for a long time before saying something that made me feel truly understood. 3 months later, we started dating. 2 years after that, he proposed during a vacation in Florida, beneath a sunset on the beach. I married Marcus and gave him the position of financial director at the company. He knew how to manage budgets, handle assets, and analyze markets. We moved into the white villa with red-tiled roof that my parents had built. It had a backyard, an old apple tree, and a nursery I had painted pale yellow back when I was still single. But the first year passed, then the second, and still no good news. I began to worry. Marcus gently comforted me, saying, "Everything will happen in its own time." Still, I decided to get checked. Marcus referred me to a private doctor, an older, quiet man. He told me I had a hormonal disorder caused by a childhood accident, and that my chances of getting pregnant were extremely low. He prescribed me some supplements and scheduled regular follow-up appointments. I trusted Marcus too much. He always drove me to the clinic, always waited in the hallway, always whispered kind words like, "Don't blame yourself, Nolan. Having a child doesn't define happiness. We can adopt. There are so many children out there who need a home." Then one day Marcus brought home a file. "There's a boy named Oliver. He's 8. His mother passed away from cancer and his father is unknown. The foster center is looking for adoptive parents." I thought, if you agree. I looked at the photo of the boy, messy brown hair, big eyes, absolutely adorable. So I nodded. The adoption process was surprisingly quick. Marcus handled everything. I only needed to sign a few minor asset transfer forms, he said, just to ensure financial stability for the adoption. I didn't read them carefully. I trusted him. Oliver moved in with us. At first he was quiet, almost distant. I tried to connect. I told him stories every night, learned to make his favorite breakfast, did everything I could to make him feel I wasn't a stranger. He didn't call me Mom. But I didn't blame him. It's just, sometimes I caught Marcus looking at the boy with eyes that didn't seem like those of an adoptive father. That gaze carried something private, as if they shared a secret I wasn't part of. Back then I didn't think much of it. But later I realized, some things, if we don't question them in time, will cost us everything. One autumn morning, as the leaves had turned yellow and the breeze began to chill, I received a message from Selena, my best friend from college. She wrote, "My back hurts so much. I heard there's a new women's clinic downtown offering discounted checkups. Can you come with me?" I was about to say no. It had been a long time since I cared about anything related to reproductive health. Every time I saw the word gynecology, it brought back memories of pointless checkups and heartbreaking diagnoses. But Selena insisted. he said. Just come with me for fun, for peace of mind. You're 38 now. You can't ignore your body anymore. I reluctantly agreed, planning to do a few basic tests and then leave. But then, in a bright room filled with the scent of antiseptic, the gentle voice of a young doctor startled me. Have you ever been diagnosed as infertile? I nodded, answering softly. I was told I had a hormonal disorder and couldn't get pregnant. She frowned, flipped through the file, then asked again. I'm sorry, but based on your hormone tests and ultrasound, your uterus is perfectly normal. Your hormone levels are a bit irregular, but nothing that would prevent pregnancy. That day I asked for a copy of the test results. On the way home, my mind spun like I had just been pulled from the most beautiful dream and thrown into a pitch-dark room. The next day I went to 2 other hospitals. Both confirmed that I was fully capable of getting pregnant. I searched my drawer looking for the old bottles of medicine I still kept. Each bottle had a plain white label with short, generic names. After a doctor examined them carefully, we discovered that although the packaging claimed they were supplements, the actual pills inside were birth control. A chill ran down my spine. The world stood still as I stared at the bottle. The one I had believed was for hormonal recovery, only to learn it had kept me from conceiving all these years. I began to follow Marcus. I installed a tracker on his car. I secretly checked his credit card statements. Strange transactions began to appear. Rent for an apartment, dinner bills in the suburbs, purchases at children's stores. And then a name kept showing up. Julia. I had never heard of her. None of our mutual friends mentioned a Julia. No relative had that name. But after a few weeks of tracking, I was sure of one thing. Marcus was meeting her regularly, not once but almost every single week. I started listening to my instincts, something I had ignored for far too long. And it whispered to me, this is no longer coincidence. This is betrayal. And it might have started even before Oliver came into my life. I hired a private investigator a week later. The man was in his 50s. He didn't seem surprised, he'd seen plenty of cases like mine. After just 2 weeks I received the first batch of photos. Marcus walked out of a 2-story house in the southern suburbs. The house looked familiar. I recognized the blue wooden gate, the climbing roses on the porch. It had once appeared on his phone's wallpaper under a vague label, New Investment Zone. But what left me frozen wasn't the house. It was the woman who followed behind him. Julia. She was younger than me, with golden brown hair, sharp features and a petite figure. And next to her was Oliver. The boy, the same child Marcus claimed was orphaned, father unknown, was riding his bike around the yard, calling out to Julia with a word that froze my heart. Mom. I couldn't blink while watching the video the investigator sent me. Julia opened the door. Marcus knelt to tie the boy's shoelaces. The boy wrapped his arms around Marcus's neck. The 3 of them looked like a real family. Family I had always longed for. The investigator provided documents. Julia was Marcus's ex-girlfriend from his days in Chicago. They had lived together, broke up after she became pregnant. Julia kept the baby and Marcus returned to his hometown, where I lived. The house Julia lived in was rented under the name of a company Marcus represented. Every month, the payments came from the financial fund I had authorized Marcus to manage. Even Oliver's tuition was paid from a child support fund, a small charity fund under my own name. I began to review the adoption documents. Marcus had said the process was simple. He emphasized I just needed to sign a few asset authorization forms to prove financial stability. But in reality, he had used those signatures to transfer ownership of part of my assets, including a commercial property in Dallas and 12% of the family company, to an anonymous company. That company, through a chain of intermediaries, belonged to Julia. Turned out they had planned this a long time ago. I quietly closed the laptop and sat still for a long time in the familiar living room. The family photo of the 3 of us on the shelf, me, Marcus, and Oliver, now looked absurd. Those smiling faces, those held hands, all of it was a lie. I pulled out the original documents and checked every paper I had signed. Hidden clauses, tiny sections buried in convoluted legal language. I had trusted someone who knew my deepest weaknesses. My pain, my longing to be loved, and my fear of being alone. I told myself, all right. His play is over. It's time I write my own story. I didn't scream. I didn't rage. I simply changed direction. Everything happened as quietly as a shifting season. At first no one noticed. But if one paid attention they would sense subtle changes. The same way I had once sensed the deceit behind Marcus's gaze. I began by setting up a personal trust company under my name with my own legal team. I gradually transferred each asset, real estate, stocks, investment funds, to this company. Every transfer was done legally, transparently, and quietly, since I remained the named owner. Next, I ordered a full audit of all assets under the family's name. I used the excuse that the company was preparing to expand, needing transparent finances for the next round of funding. I signed with an independent auditing firm, one with no ties to Marcus. Marcus immediately panicked. I knew he didn't trust it, but he didn't dare interfere. Because to the public I was still his wife. Still the gentle, graceful Nolan, the woman who lived for her family. At the same time, I quietly revoked all Marcus's legal representative rights, including signing authority, access to company accounts, and the power to transfer internal assets. All changes were processed through internal documents, with the approval of the board, men who had once been close friends of my father. I rewrote my will, removing Marcus from all inheritance. The new appointed trustee was Selena, my best friend, tasked with managing my assets in any unforeseen circumstance. Every decision was now secured by a strict authorization system, leaving no loophole for Marcus to exploit. I hired a legal specialist to review the entire adoption file for Oliver. And there they found clear illegalities, falsifying the mother's identity, manipulating the asset transfer process, and most importantly, lying about the child's paternity, which should have been fully disclosed. Marcus started to notice that I was changing. He asked why I had been so quiet lately, why I was going out more, working with unfamiliar people. I just smiled and said, maybe I just wanted a change. Staying home gets boring. Finally, I did the most important thing. I backed up and printed every piece of evidence. The investigators' files, financial statements, fake contracts, photos, videos, recordings, and handed them to my lawyer. I didn't say a word. I just waited for the right moment. One January morning, Marcus burst into my office in a panic, holding a notice from the bank. The investment account's frozen. What the hell did you do? I looked at him, calm, resolute. I'm just taking back what was rightfully mine. And for the first time in our entire marriage, Marcus realized I had found out. I filed for divorce on our 8th wedding anniversary. Marcus was stunned, then immediately began to beg. He came to see me in the rain, standing under the porch soaking wet, shivering. Nolan, please. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I handed the full file to my attorney. The evidence was undeniable. Falsifying information in the adoption papers. Fraudulent asset transfers via shell companies. Deliberately altering medical diagnoses to control reproduction. Embezzlement of both personal and business funds. My lawyer filed not just for divorce, but for organized asset fraud and reputational damage. Julia, the woman who had always stood behind Marcus, disappeared with Oliver as soon as the court summons arrived. The house she rented was empty. Not a single trace left behind. Marcus tried to turn the situation around, but it was no use. After the trial, I never returned to the old villa. I moved into a smaller house by the lake with a wide porch and a rose garden I tended myself. I returned to the company and started from scratch, learning about operations, finance, and corporate law. Those who once saw me as a trophy wife now looked at me differently. I no longer wore my wedding ring. Instead, I wore a small stone bracelet, a gift I gave myself after my first year of truly living a new life. 2 years later, at an investment seminar in California, I met Ethan, the CEO of an international travel company. He had lost his wife to cancer and was raising his daughter alone. We married in a small ceremony, surrounded by close friends. A year later, I gave birth to twin boys, healthy with yellow hair and eyes that looked just like mine when I was young. The first time I held them, I cried from joy. I was never robbed of the ability to be a mother. Someone had just tried to steal it before I ever got the chance to see how beautiful it truly was. If this story touched your heart or made you think of someone who needs to hear it, please share the video. Thumbs up, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue bringing you stories that touch the soul. Speech balloon, have you ever been through something like this? Leave a comment, your story might give someone else the strength they need.